The glass doors of La Lumiere swung open, and the hum of the city spilled into the restaurant. A towering figure stepped inside, his presence immediately drawing the attention of every diner. Dressed in a simple gray t-shirt, sweatpants, and worn-out sneakers, he looked out of place amidst a sea of tailored suits and silk gowns. The crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over the room, but their light seemed to avoid him, as if even the restaurant itself was unsure of his place here. Emma, the waitress, noticed him the moment he walked in. Her lips curled into a faint sneer as her eyes scanned his casual attire. She had worked at La Lumiere for years, and in her mind, she was the gatekeeper of its elegance. This man, with his unassuming appearance, didn't belong. She approached him, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor, her voice dripping with condescension. "Good evening," she said, her tone laced with mockery. "Are you sure you want to dine here? This is a fine dining establishment." The man looked up, his calm gaze meeting hers. "Yes," he replied, his voice steady and warm. "I'd like to try the experience here." Emma's smirk deepened. She led him to the farthest corner of the restaurant, near the kitchen, where the clatter of dishes and faint traces of food aromas lingered. "This spot should match your style perfectly," she said, dropping the menu onto the table with a thud loud enough to draw glances from nearby patrons. The man, Shaquille O'Neal, sat down, his towering frame folding into the chair with ease. He opened the menu, his expression unbothered, as if the subtle humiliation didn't faze him. Emma watched him from a distance, her irritation growing. She had expected him to fluster, to leave, but his calmness only fueled her frustration. When she returned to take his order, she leaned in, her voice low but sharp. "The most expensive dish here is $350. Are you sure you can handle that?" Shaq looked up, his eyes steady. "I'll have the filet mignon rossini," he said, his tone as calm as if he were ordering a cup of coffee. Emma's smirk faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered. "Oh, really?" she said, her voice syrupy sweet but laced with scorn. "I hope you know how to appreciate it. This isn't the kind of food everyone is accustomed to." Shaq simply smiled. "Thank you for the suggestion. I'm looking forward to trying it." As the meal progressed, the tension in the room grew. Diners whispered among themselves, some casting sympathetic glances at Shaq, others watching with curiosity. Emma continued her subtle jabs, her voice loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "People like that usually pick expensive items just to look fancy," she muttered to a colleague. "Wait till the check comes. I bet he'll leave right away." But Shaq remained unshaken. He ate his meal with the same calm composure, his presence commanding the room in a way that made Emma's pettiness all the more glaring. The murmurs grew louder, and the atmosphere shifted from one of quiet elegance to one of uneasy tension. Then the restaurant manager, Mr. Thompson, emerged from the reception desk. He strode quickly toward Shaq's table, his face marked with visible concern. "Shaq," he said, his voice low and full of respect, "it's such an honor to have you here. I apologize for the delay. We had no idea you were coming today." The room fell silent. Every eye turned toward the corner table, where Shaq sat, his calm demeanor unchanged. Emma froze, her tray slipping from her hands and clattering to the floor. The sound echoed through the room, but no one seemed to notice. All attention was on Shaq, who simply smiled at Mr. Thompson. "It's no problem," Shaq said, his voice steady. "I just wanted to enjoy a quiet dinner." Emma's face paled. She felt the weight of every gaze in the room, the judgment, the shame. She had been so sure of herself, so confident in her superiority, but now she stood exposed, her arrogance laid bare. Shaq set down his knife and fork and rose to his feet. His towering presence filled the room, his voice deep and resonant. "This restaurant was founded to welcome everyone," he said, his words carrying a weight that seemed to vibrate through the air. "No matter what they look like or where they come from. That's the philosophy we've always believed in." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the room. "Unfortunately, today we failed to uphold that belief. But mistakes don't define us. What matters is what we learn from them." Emma lowered her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. She knew there was no excuse for her actions, no justification for the way she had treated him. Shaq's words weren't just a lesson for her. They were a lesson for everyone in the room. As the night drew to a close, the staff gathered around Shaq, their faces a mix of shame and determination. Shaq looked at each of them, his eyes reflecting a mixture of sternness and hope. "This restaurant isn't defined by fancy tables or expensive dishes," he said. "It's defined by people, by how we treat each other and our guests. And if we don't do that with respect and compassion, nothing else matters." The room fell silent, the weight of his words sinking in. Emma wiped her tears, feeling as though a heavy burden had been lifted. She knew this wasn't just a lesson for her job. It was a lesson for her life. As Shaq walked out of La Lumiere, the glass doors closing gently behind him, the restaurant seemed to exhale, the tension dissipating into the night. The lesson he had imparted would linger, a reminder that true strength lies not in judgment, but in kindness. And in that moment, La Lumiere was no longer just a restaurant. It was a symbol of hope, change, and the power of compassion. The night air was cool as Shaq stepped out of La Lumiere, the faint hum of the city wrapping around him like a blanket. He paused for a moment, his towering figure silhouetted against the glow of the restaurant's windows. Inside, the staff was still gathered, their faces a mix of reflection and resolve. Shaq knew the lesson he had imparted would take time to sink in, but he also knew that change had to start somewhere. Tonight, it had started here. He took a deep breath, the crisp air filling his lungs, and began to walk down the quiet street. The lights of Beverly Hills sparkled around him, but his mind was elsewhere. He thought about Emma, about the way her arrogance had crumbled under the weight of her own mistakes. He thought about the other staff members, the diners who had watched in silence, and the ones who had whispered their disapproval. Change wasn't just about one person, it was about everyone. It was about creating a space where respect and compassion were the norm, not the exception. As he walked, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out and saw a text from an old friend, someone he hadn't spoken to in years. The message was simple. "Heard about what happened at La Lumiere. You always did know how to make a point." Shaq smiled faintly and typed a quick reply. "Just doing what's right. Hope you're well." He slipped the phone back into his pocket and continued walking, his thoughts drifting to the past. He remembered his early days in the NBA, the way people had judged him based on his size, his playing style, his demeanor. He had faced countless critics, countless doubters, but he had always risen above it, not through anger or retaliation, but through patience, through kindness, through an unshakable belief in himself and his values. Tonight, he had done the same thing, not on a basketball court, but in a restaurant. The setting was different, but the lesson was the same. Back inside La Lumiere, the staff was still gathered in the main dining room. The chandeliers cast a soft glow over the space, but the atmosphere was heavy with reflection. Emma stood at the edge of the group, her head bowed, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She felt the weight of every gaze, every silent judgment, but she also felt something else, a glimmer of hope. Shaq's words had struck a chord deep within her, and for the first time in a long time, she felt the stirrings of change. Mr. Thompson, the restaurant manager, stepped forward, his expression serious, but not unkind. "Tonight was a wake-up call for all of us," he said, his voice carrying through the room. "We failed to uphold the values that this restaurant was founded on. But as Shaq said, mistakes don't define us. What matters is what we do next." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the room. "Starting tomorrow, we're going to make some changes. We're going to retrain, refocus, and recommit to the principles of respect and compassion. This isn't just about one incident. It's about who we are as a team and as individuals." Emma felt a lump rise in her throat. She knew she had been at the center of the incident, but she also knew that she wasn't the only one who needed to change. The entire team had been complicit in creating an environment where judgment and arrogance could thrive. It was time to break that cycle. "Emma," Mr. Thompson said, his voice softening slightly, "I'd like you to take the lead on this. I want you to work with the team to develop a new training program, one that emphasizes empathy and understanding. This isn't a punishment, it's an opportunity." Emma looked up, her eyes wide with surprise. "Me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Thompson nodded. You've been given a second chance, and I believe you can make the most of it. But this isn't just about you. It's about all of us. Emma swallowed hard and nodded. I'll do my best, she said, her voice trembling but determined. The rest of the staff murmured their agreement, their expressions a mix of relief and resolve. They knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but they also knew it was necessary. La Lumiere wasn't just a restaurant. It was a symbol of elegance and sophistication. But tonight, it had become something more, a symbol of hope and change. The next morning, the sun rose over Beverly Hills, casting a golden glow over the city. La Lumiere stood silent and still, its glass doors reflecting the early light. Inside, the staff was already hard at work, preparing for the day ahead. Emma arrived early, her heart pounding with a mix of nerves and determination. She had spent the night thinking about Shaq's words, about the mistakes she had made, and about the opportunity she had been given. As she walked through the doors, she was greeted by Jake, the young waiter who had stood by silently during the incident. He gave her a small smile, his eyes filled with a mix of curiosity and hope. "Morning, Emma," he said. "Ready to get started?" Emma nodded, her resolve hardening. "Yeah," she said. "Let's do this." The two of them sat down at one of the tables, a notebook and pen between them. They began to outline the new training program, focusing on empathy, understanding, and the importance of treating every guest with respect. They talked about the incident, about the lessons they had learned, and about the changes they wanted to make. It wasn't easy. There were moments of tension, moments of doubt, but they pushed through, driven by a shared sense of purpose. As the day went on, the rest of the staff began to arrive. They gathered in the dining room, their expressions a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Emma stood at the front of the room, her heart pounding, but her voice steady. "Thank you all for being here," she said. "Last night was a wake-up call for all of us. We failed to uphold the values that this restaurant was founded on, but today, we have the opportunity to change that." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the room. "We're going to start with a new training program, one that focuses on empathy and understanding. This isn't just about how we treat our guests. It's about how we treat each other. We're a team, and we need to act like one." The staff murmured their agreement, their expressions a mix of relief and resolve. They knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but they also knew it was necessary. La Lumiere wasn't just a restaurant. It was a symbol of elegance and sophistication. But today, it was becoming something more, a symbol of hope and change. Over the next few weeks, the changes at La Lumiere became evident. The staff underwent rigorous training, focusing not just on the technical aspects of their jobs, but on the emotional and interpersonal skills that were just as important. They practiced active listening, empathy, and conflict resolution, learning how to handle difficult situations with grace and understanding. Emma threw herself into the training, determined to make the most of the opportunity she had been given. She worked closely with Jake and the rest of the team, leading by example and encouraging others to do the same. It wasn't always easy. There were moments of frustration, moments of doubt, but she pushed through, driven by a newfound sense of purpose. The changes didn't go unnoticed. Guests began to comment on the difference in the atmosphere, on the warmth and professionalism of the staff. Word spread, and soon, La Lumiere was busier than ever, not just because of its exquisite food and elegant ambience, but because of the way it made people feel. One evening, as the restaurant buzzed with activity, Emma noticed a familiar face walking through the door. It was Shaq, dressed once again in casual clothes, his towering figure drawing the attention of every diner. Emma's heart skipped a beat, but she took a deep breath and approached him, her smile genuine and warm. "Good evening, Mr. O'Neill," she said, her voice steady. "It's an honor to have you here again." Shaq looked at her, his eyes filled with a mix of curiosity and approval. "Thank you, Emma," he said, his voice warm. "It's good to be back." Emma led him to a table, not in the corner, but in the center of the room, where the light from the chandeliers bathed the space in a golden glow. She handed him the menu, her movements graceful and confident. "I hope you enjoy your meal," she said, "and if there's anything you need, please don't hesitate to ask." Shaq nodded, his smile genuine. "Thank you, Emma. I'm sure I will." As she walked away, Emma felt a sense of pride and accomplishment. She knew she still had a long way to go, but she also knew she was on the right path. The changes at La Lumiere were just the beginning, but they were a powerful reminder of the impact that kindness and compassion could have. As the weeks turned into months, the story of La Lumiere spread, becoming a symbol of hope and change in a world that often felt divided and judgmental. Shaq's visit had been a turning point, not just for the restaurant, but for everyone who had witnessed it. It was a reminder that true strength lies not in judgment or arrogance, but in kindness, in understanding, in the willingness to learn and grow. And as Shaq walked out of La Lumiere that night, the glass doors closing gently behind him, he knew that the lesson he had imparted would continue to ripple outward, touching lives in ways he could never have imagined. The world needed more kindness, more compassion, more understanding. And it started with small, consistent choices, made every day by people like Emma, like Jake, like the staff at La Lumiere. The road ahead was long, but it was a road worth traveling. And as Shaq disappeared into the night, the lights of Beverly Hills sparkling around him, he knew that the story of La Lumiere was just the beginning.